Hello, everybody, and welcome to Shift+F1, a podcast about speedy race cars. I am Drew Scanlon. Joining me, we have Danny O'Dwyer. How are you, Danny?
I'm good. I'm excited to prime the season. I feel like there has never been a season that required priming quite like this one.
Yeah, certainly not in the history of our podcast. Joining us also, we have Rob Zagney. How are you, Rob?
Still trying to wrap my head around some of the changes to how these things work. So it'll be a learning primer for the first time in a number of years.
Fantastic. Well, welcome everyone to our preseason primer episode. This episode is designed to explain everything you need to know to enjoy Formula One, even if you've never watched any motorsports before. We're going to talk about the cars, the rules, the teams, the drivers, everything. It's going to be a beefy one this year, especially because, as Danny mentioned, this season is bringing the biggest change to the sport in over a decade. I mean, we've been doing this since 2014, yes. And that was the last big regulation change. So
and
this
I would
is probably
argue
the biggest one since then.
Yeah, and I would argue this feels like fundamentally bigger than the turbo hybrid era. Like this is a we have fundamentally changed this sport. It seems like from what we've seen from testing so far.
No, I'm with you, Danny. I was thinking about that too in terms of the scale of changes. The big changes have historically been like we've overhauled aero regs and there's new rules about engines.
Right.
And this year it's like, well, aero works different than it's ever worked before. We've also changed the engines. And also now there's new driver modes that we've just introduced. So this is a pretty sweeping overhaul of a sport that usually big changes feel more incremental than this.
Yeah, and hey, we'll just stick a new team in there too while we're at it.
Why not? So one note before we begin, this is going to be a lot of information, especially if you're new to F1. My advice is that trying to remember everything might be a little overwhelming. So instead, just kind of let it wash over you. And when you actually start watching races, that's when a lot of this stuff is going to fall into place. You'll hear commentators say something and you go, oh, right, I remember that. That's how that works. And we're going to be right here with you all season. We do weekly episodes where we dissect what happened in each race and then talk about the next race coming up. Our kind of policy is that we don't dumb anything down, but we do try to be accessible and keep things in context. So if you like what we do here, you can support us over at patreon.com/shiftf1, which also gets you access to our Discord server where there are tons of other friendly folks who are there to answer any F1 related questions you have. And you can also email us, shiftf1podcast@gmail.com. We usually take emails during pre-race shows and love hearing from newbies and veterans alike.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll do some housekeeping at the end and also list out our title sponsors. But I want to quickly also mention to people, if they're interested in signing up, that we are doing 90% off the first month. So if you sign up now, up until the end of the first race weekend, which is March 8th, Sunday, March 8th, if you head over to the Patreon, there should be a 90% off your first month for most of our tiers. And the code you can use if you want is multi26, but I think that actually is superfluous. I think you can just go to the page MULTI26, a nice callback to Red Bull days of past for those F1 aficionados.
Yes, many F1 in-jokes that you will become aware of through this podcast. All right, well, like I said, there have been a lot of changes since last season, but we're going to start with the basics here. Formula One is the world's fastest, arguably the most prestigious, and certainly the most watched motor racing championship in the world. It's been around since 1950, and it works like a lot of other sports. There are teams that compete at events over the course of a season, and at the end of a season, a champion is crowned. So to break that down, this year there are 11 teams with 2 drivers each, meaning that there are 22 drivers in each race.
Good math.
Yeah, that's right. That's why they pay me the big bucks. The season takes place from March into December. This year there are 24 races, each at a different track. across 20 different countries, and we will get to exactly where we're going later in the episode. At each race, drivers earn points based on how they finish, and the one with the most points at the end of the season wins the championship. There are technically 2 championships. One's for the drivers and one is for the teams, which is called the Constructors' Championship. And the team's points are made up of their drivers' points. That usually means that the winner of the Drivers' Championship is on the team that wins the Constructors' Championship, but not always. Really, though, what we're all watching for is the Drivers' Championship. That's what the fans really care about.
Yeah, exactly. That's the sort of crux of it. The Constructors is a nice sort of the English Football League equivalent would be like winning the Premier League and winning the FA Cup or something like that. It's like a side pot, but all of this stuff is super important, especially the Constructors for the teams, because there's a decent prize pot that comes with that one.
Yes, the teams care the most about the Constructors' Championship. Their ranking there has a direct effect on the amount of prize money that they receive from F1. Money's at the heart of a lot of sports, and it's no different here.
Interestingly, the drivers themselves do not get a prize pot from F1 or the FIA for winning the Drivers' Championship, but they may have something in their contract, that means if they were smart enough, they'll have something in their contract that says they get a bonus if they win it. Or if their teammate wins it. That's a lot of people have that in there too.
Yeah. So the bonuses for the teams can sort of lead to a feedback loop that keeps the top teams at the top. But that makes it all the more exciting when another team does well out of nowhere. And that's also why we pay so much attention to like tiny little car tweaks, because you never know. Each one could give that team an edge. I remember having the revelation when I was first getting into F1 that it can be really exciting to see someone come in third because they're an underdog.
Yeah.
And I mention that to illustrate that the more you know about a team's capabilities and indeed how the entire sport works, the more exciting it can be when you watch them exceed those capabilities. And that's really the whole point of this podcast, because the more you know about F1, the more interesting and the more fun it is.
Yeah, most sports are sort of binary. There's like usually 2 teams in many sports and then one winner. I think or even in tournaments, you'll eventually have a winner in like golf or tennis or something. Motorsports are kind of different. Like you're sort of looking at the spread across the whole thing. Honestly, there's been time where someone has crept into the top 10 and gotten their first points, and it's been like something really exciting for everyone to watch.
Yeah, especially, we have a new team, like, creating a Formula One team from the ground up and then getting points in their first season, that would be huge.
Yes, absolutely. The first time Cadillac get a point, it'll be very noteworthy.
Yes. But yeah, back to money. Like you said, drivers may get bonuses. Those are defined by their contracts, which aren't public. But we do know that these guys are pretty well paid. The drivers Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton were 23rd and 24th on last year's Forbes list of the highest paid athletes at $80 million and $78 million, respectively, near people like Patrick Mahomes and Neymar.
Does that also include sponsorship deals outside of F1? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's overall compensation. F1 is trying to... They have a mechanism to sort of curb the feedback loop a little bit with a spending cap for each team. It did get bumped up this year to account for the new car designs to $215 million, but that does not include driver salaries or travel costs, which are considerable. One team did breach the spending cap in 2021 and was penalized with both a fine and a reduction in the amount of wind tunnel time that they can use to develop the aerodynamics of their next car.
No dessert and no wind tunnel time for you tonight.
Yes, we are going to be talking a lot about aerodynamics later in this episode and in general. Okay, so what will you see when you actually sit down and watch a race? For any given race weekend, as we call it, there are actually a few more events that happen. First, there are the practice sessions, 2 on Friday and 1 on Saturday, that last about an hour each. Since the cars change every year and the track conditions are never consistent, it's important for the teams to send their cars around and dial in their setups by making all kinds of adjustments. Most of that's invisible since teams tend to play their cards pretty close to the chest, but you can usually get a broad sense of how a team might do based on their practice performance. It's also a great background thing to throw on, and the commentators also need to fill time because practice is kind of boring. So they go deep on like minutia in F1 stuff. So if you really want to pick up like tiny little details, watch practice.
Yeah, I don't know about you guys. Rob, to me, it reminds me of like baseball. You know what I mean? Like practice sessions are like, you're just kind of listening, you're just kind of vibing. It's like low stakes for most of it, and then something exciting happens.
Yeah, some sports do enter that podcast zone
Yes.
of, look, like sometimes there's not a lot that's happening. You're going to mostly hear commentators talking about the sport more broadly, and this is frequently where you get the most like insight in some ways that you would not get during a close match. In F1, that often means gossip during practice sessions. Although there are now so many technically savvy people in the commentary booths that you will often have asides about like, hey, look at this cool picture of a wing we got.
Especially this year where, really, I think there's going to be way keener eyes on practice, for the first few races for sure, just because we're trying to figure this out. And the teams and the drivers are too, these new regulations.
Yeah. The next event of the weekend is qualifying, which is kind of a misnomer. You can't really fail to qualify in the modern era of F1. Qualifying is more about determining the order that the cars will start the race in. It takes place on Saturday after the third practice session and is divided into 3 parts, each about 15 minutes long. In the first session, which we call Q1, all the cars go out on track and try to set the fastest lap time they can. At the end of Q1, the slowest 6 cars are eliminated, and those are the cars that start at the back of the grid in positions 17 through 22.
Oh, that's weird.
We had to do different math.
Yes.
It's not a nice clean 5 and 5. In Q2, the remaining cars go again, and once more, the slowest 6 are knocked out. And then in Q3, we've got 10 cars left, and again, their best times in that session determine their starting order. So the fastest car in the Q3 session starts the race in front, and we call that pole position.
Wait, so 5 out the first?
It's 6. 6 are eliminated in the first one, 6 are eliminated in the second one, and then we've got 10 remaining.
Okay.
Yeah. It is important to know that it's how you do in each session that determines your starting place. It's not your overall best time. So, for example, rain could show up in Q3 and make everybody slower than the cars that got knocked out in Q2, but those in Q3 would still start in the top 10. It's also important to know that despite it basically being a time trial, qualifying is pretty fun to watch.
Yes.
The ticking of the clock really adds to the drama, and you can get some pretty amazing moments, especially if rain shows up, because that tends to throw everybody's plans into disarray.
Yeah, and there's a thing called track evolution, which I'm sure we'll get into, but the more the cars are driving on these tracks, generally, the faster the cars can go because the track's getting a bit warmer. It's laying down little pieces of rubber from the tires on the driving line. So oftentimes it is the last lap of a qualifying session that determines the fastest lap. Not always, as Drew said, sometimes there's rain, but it means that like the qualifying, kind of like the race, has like a sort of an interesting, build up and culmination that's fun to watch.
Yeah, I'd say most importantly for me, qualifying is really sort of the first chapter in the story of the race. I feel sort of incomplete if I don't watch qualifying because I just turn on the race and you go, well, hey, how's that guy starting in third?
And track position is so important as well for races. Like, sometimes it's hard to overtake in these races, and especially if you're first, you get to sort of dictate the pace a little bit. So yeah, it's very meaningful qualifying in F1.
Yeah. F1 does put highlights of every session on YouTube, so if you don't have an hour to devote to qualifying, you can still get the gist in about 7 minutes.
Yeah, and the practices too.
Yes, that's generally how I watch the practices. Okay, the races, each of which is technically called a Grand Prix, which is French for grand prize.
Big prize.
The races are on Sunday and last a maximum of 2 hours, during which drivers race over 190 miles. The number of laps varies because each circuit is a different length, but the total mileage is about the same. All races feature at least one pit stop, which we'll talk about in a bit. And at the end, as we mentioned, the drivers are awarded points that contribute to their championship standing. Crucially, only the top 10 finishers get any points. First place gets 25 points, second place gets 18, third place gets 15, and it sort of decrements down to 1 point for 10th place. And if you're wondering, it is pretty brutal. If you finish just outside the top 10, you get 0 points for doing a whole race weekend. But that is just one of the many stories that you as a viewer are following, because sometimes, like you said, Danny, it is a huge achievement if an underdog driver or team gets a big haul of points. Okay, now that I've thrown all of that at you, there is one more kind of confusing event that only shows up occasionally. There are 6 sprint events sprinkled throughout the year. The sprint is basically a short race that happens a day before the actual race. It is 1/3 the distance of the normal race, and there are no pit stops. The top 8 finishers in the sprint earn points, with 8 points for first place down to 1 point for 8th. On the weekends where there is a sprint, we get 1 practice session on Friday, followed by sprint-specific qualifying, which works like regular qualifying, but the sessions are a little shorter. On Saturday, the sprint happens, and then we do qualifying for the actual race. And then the race is on Sunday as usual.
Yeah, this was also a little bit confusing for us when they brought it in a few years ago. And
Yeah.
they've messed around with the format a few times. And every year they sort of change which locations, which race weekends, which countries that these sprints happen in. It is purely an effort to get more people to watch races. But it's been,
Some more tickets.
Well,
largely
That's-
successful.
this is in keeping with another thing that's really important to know about F1, which is they do love money a lot.
They do.
And
They love that
they are looking for ways to increase revenue without making costs change very much. And so all those nice things that Drew just mentioned about like the structure of a race weekend, the same way that like there's sometimes practice can be a little bit boring. F1 knows that, but they want to sell 3-day passes. And so they want people to have reasons to show up all 3 days. And so the sprint weekend, promoters like it because it brings more people out and gives people more racing action to see, but doesn't require staging an entire new race because F1, the calendar is already expanded in recent years. And there's kind of soft agreement that they're not going to add more races. So a bit like where NFL football is, if you're stuck to you just have this many race weekends a year, how can you get a little more sporting action that people care about? And so the sprint weekend has been the answer to that. The pursuit of ticket revenue will also explain why some courses also have an elusive characteristic now and appear like rare Pokemon sometimes as F1 because the way courses are selected is people pay F1 fees to host races and they need to make that money back, and so that is another factor that accounts for a lot of the structure of F1.
Yeah, we'll go through the whole calendar later, but just so you know, we might as well, sort of talk about it here. The 6 sprint races we have this year are happening in China, Miami, Canada, Britain, Holland, or the Netherlands, apologies, and Singapore.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, F1 basically, they're relatively new, the sprints. Sometimes they're fun, sometimes they're boring. Some people like them, some people don't. I tend to think that they sort of add a little bit to the like race fatigue that I get after seeing a circuit so much over the weekend. But they are sometimes fun. All right. Well, speaking of earning money, we are going to take a quick commercial break. except for the people on Patreon. So if you don't want to hear ads, you can go sign up for Patreon. That is an ad-free version of the show. But we'll be right back, and we're going to talk about the Cars.
Great band.
Okay, well, we've discussed the format, which we've had for many years now, but let's now talk about the Cars, which, as we've said, are pretty different for this year. And for this, I'm going to hand it over to Rob.
Yeah, huge changes with the Cars this year. So I guess where to start things off is we still often talk about F1 engines. This is now kind of a misnomer, and you'll hear official commentators talk less in terms about engines and more in terms of power units. And that is because an F1 engine is no longer a simple internal combustion engine. It is a hybrid engine, and this year, the big change introduced to Formula One is that they now require half the car's power is produced by internal combustion engine, and half of it is produced electrically from a source from a battery that is recharged over the course of a lap. So when they discuss the power unit, it's all the various components that go into comprising the things what make car go. And as is, as anyone who's sort of looked at hybrid prices versus internal combustion engine cars, there's more going on with hybrids, and that remains true in F1. And so you have a lot of different parts that can wear out at different rates and break down differently. So when we're talking about the power unit, we are talking about the internal combustion engine component. We're talking about a battery system. And crucially, we're also talking about what they call the MGU-K, motor generator unit kinetic. That is the thing that harvests waste energy from most typically braking. But with the shift in how much the car has to be powered off the battery, they are now doing some of the things that you see more in electric cars, where it's trying to sneak in ways to harvest energy even when you're not braking. And so there'll be times that will sort of spin the motor a little harder to basically wind up the battery over the course of a lap. So this is a big shift. They also discarded a piece of the hybrid unit that they've had for a number of years, the MGU-H, which used thermal, like wasted thermal output to power the car. That was really complicated and breakage-prone system. Nobody liked it, and as you'll hear this term a lot, it's not road relevant. The manufacturers don't get useful data off an MGU-H because electric cars aren't going to have a lot of, exhaust gases being pumped out from them, so that's not relevant to designing for electric cars. So that system is gone. I'll just mention it here because it's already come up. It turns out that was also a vital system for making the turbos work really smoothly in the previous generations of F1. And so, unintended side effect of eliminating the system that nobody really liked, the car's response to throttle inputs and sort of the power curve of the engine, really different than in previous years. And apparently also the car has a much higher chance of just kind of borderline stalling out at the start. So keep an eye out for that, because there's a lot of drivers who've been used to, there's always this thermal system that's like powering the turbos by cycling air back through the engine. That system's gone. And so the turbos can't really run until the engine itself is running. So that is just a thing to keep an eye out for. Now, they've also introduced a whole bunch of stuff that is happening with the car dynamically across the lap. Since we're talking about power units already, we'll continue talking about that. The drivers now have access to boost, which they can basically deploy the full power of the engine at the push of a button over the course of a lap. They can't the way F1 makes it so that teams can't effectively destroy the power unit in seeking efficiencies is that the teams are always limited in how much charge and recharge the engine is allowed to do over the course of a lap. Boost doesn't let you break that formula. So if you've sort of run down the battery, the boost isn't available to you. Now, crucially, there's also something else, overtake mode. In previous years, because F1 has always struggled mightily to guarantee that cars can actually pass each other on track, which is kind of an important thing in a racing series, they introduced something called DRS, the drag reduction system. And that would cause the rear wing, which creates a lot of downforce, but also creates a lot of drag. It would cause it to flip open, and it was like, you see sprinters training with a parachute. That was the equivalent of like cutting the parachute off and just go sprinting down a straightaway. They got rid of that system. It lives on in a form. I'll talk about that in a second. They got rid of that system, though, but the way it worked was when you were within 1 second of a car you were following, you would pass a detection point to determine whether or not you were in that zone, and then you had access to the DRS system. They have gotten rid of that, and they've replaced it with overtake mode. There's one detection point across the lap, but then you get access to an overtake mode, which is distinct from boost. And the way it's distinct is that does allow you to break the rules, basically, around harvesting and deployment. So everyone, with boost, they're limited to, you have to stay within this bound. If you're in overtake range of someone, now the car is allowed to harvest and deploy more energy per lap. It basically allows the engine to operate according to a different formula.
You could say the engine goes Super Saiyan.
Yeah. That is the theory they're hoping for. We will see how it works in practice.
That's the title I went for. I'm not a huge fan of overtake mode. It sounds like something you'd get in like a Tesla, you know what I mean? Like it sounds like you press the button and it's like self-driving mode.
Does it though? I don't know. I mean, a Tesla would be like based mode, epic Windsor, bacon, that kind of. Yeah, that I think is
it did used to be called manual override mode or MOM.
Oh, MOM.
And they changed it to overtake.
I can't. Oh well. Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah, it's better than that.
I don't know though. That would have been pretty funny.
MOM.
He's activated MOM.
Yeah, people like sort of anthropomorphizing the system.
That's our version of Funky Boy. It could have been MOM mode. I like it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this is how that system is going to work. But there's other things happening across the lap too. DRS is gone, which allowed the rear wing to be adjusted live over the course of the lap. But really, is it gone? Or is the whole car now DRS?
Everything
because they've moved
DRS.
to active aerodynamics, which is kind of what it sounds like. You have a lot of aerodynamic elements, wings, winglets, things that create downforce, which increases grip and cornering performance, but also generate drag and slow down the car and make it a little bit less efficient when it comes to how it uses power. Well, now, when the car detects its entering a corner, the wings pop out, basically, and they take a more active role because they go into a higher drag, higher grip configuration. And then when the car is in high-speed zones, the wings kind of like tuck themselves away a little bit and move into a lower grip configuration. It's kind of the F1 equivalent of like the old F14 Tomcat, like swing wings type thing.
It does feel very like flaps and ailerons or something, It kind of, I kind of like
it's
it.
It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
We're not to get ahead of ourselves, but so a lot of these changes, the drivers are really conflicted about them. But this is the other thing you got to know about F1 drivers. Persnickety bunch. Really conservative. You're basically dealing with like first chair classical violinists or cellists in terms of their skill, like the greatest orchestras in the world. And then every few years, it's like, oh yeah, we just smashed your instrument. It's in pieces. You can't use it anymore. Here's
There's
a
another
YouTube
string
one.
now. Figure it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So like drivers have really hyperbolic reactions to a lot of changes like this, and that's happening this year. Some of this stuff is not super popular. We'll see the proof will be in the pudding, all that. We'll see how the racing is. But I'm kind of with you, Danny. Seeing these cars zipping around the track and kind of breathing.
You're right. Yeah, yeah.
Like like they go into corners and the wings come out, and then like as it accelerates out of the corner and the wings go away. It's kind of neat. There's a lot of parts of this that's kind of cool.
And we haven't seen this yet, obviously, except for some, a little bit of testing that they've done before the season. But so we don't exactly have the details about how all this stuff works intricately. But it sounds to me like the corner mode is like the default mode. Like the car is just in that until the driver, and I think it's manual, the driver switches to straight mode. And they can only do that in designated parts of the track. Because if you allowed a driver to change to straight mode in a corner, they might try to do that and to overtake and fly off the track, right?
New evolutions, creating gnarly car accidents. Something F1 generally historically tries to avoid, and so they would try to. That would be a real shift in direction if they were now creating modes that generated more awesome and cinematic, like cars flying off the track, as in the F1 movie.
Especially the speed these cars go at. There's a sort of a fundamental thing I feel like when you first get into F1 that you start to understand, because all this stuff about wings, like you might, what's a wing? It's it's like when you see a spoiler on the back of a car or something like that. Road cars don't generally need these things, but when these cars are so sort of comparatively light when compared to the speed that they go at, that essentially they are like airplane wings turned upside down. They are pushing the car down into the ground. And I guess when you're going fast, you don't need as much of that. But when you're driving these cars slow with the amount of like torque, like acceleration that they're able to generate and the lightness of it, they need help sticking to the surface in those sections rather than when they're on a straight. The sort of the speed is pushing the car down a good bit more.
The other big change to this car, and to me visually, I can see it. They've made the car smaller.
Yes.
The wheelbase has been shortened. So I think we reached our peak like 2 or 3 years ago, where literally the length of an F1 car, nose to tail, was comparable to a stretch limousine by all accounts. And that made for cars that, it sounds weird, that made the cars faster. On these tracks, it's kind of limited where you could run these cars. But on F1 tracks, it made the cars faster, but also less nimble, less capable of dicing it up again, like trying to create more passing. So this year, they shrank the cars down a little bit. The active aero came into play, but the flip side of that was they made aerodynamics much simpler. Under the theory that if you have less sophisticated aerodynamics, you're generating less wake turbulence and making it easier for cars to chase each other down and follow. And they also shrank the tires. Was it just the rear tires, or is it all the tires? Either way, the tires have gotten smaller.
Yeah.
And
they've hubcaps now.
and tires are, and really F1 is, it's all about the tires. In terms of races and strategy, mostly we are talking about how drivers are using their tires, how are those performing. So we should probably get into that next.
Yeah. Strategy.
So the F1 tire is solely produced by Pirelli. Pirelli was given a brief again, because tires are so critical to F1 and because the strategy around tires is a lot of the action, they were told to make tires that were good but not too good, basically. If you have no constraints, tire technology is in a place where you could make really grippy, really hard tires that pretty much last the length of a race, and you do not have to waste time in the pits changing tires. But what probably we're told was create tires that will sort of provide a lot of grip, but also wear out and force teams and drivers to sort of make calculations about how they're going to run their race strategy. And to amplify that, the teams have to each car has to run 2 compounds of tire over the course of the weekend. So you have to run 2 different tires with 2 different degrees of hardness in the race if you're going to stay within the rules. Rule of thumb is harder tire, more durable, less grip. Softer it gets, sort of follows intuitively. It's going to be a little grippier, but it will also shred apart a little bit faster. This year, did you see that we have a new graphic on the timing and scoring poll on the left-hand side? So the tires are identified, they're color-coded. Red is softest, medium is yellow, hardest is white striped tires. But that changes weekend to weekend because they bring different compounds, probably makes 5 different tire compounds to each track. Some tracks have a more abrasive surface, some have a smoother one. And so what is hard, what is medium, what is soft might change depending on the weekend. The compounds themselves are the C1 through the C5. The C1 compound is hardest and the C5 is the softest. Now, Drew, the display shows it's color-coded, but they also tell you what compound they're using. So you will see yellow, you will see like yellow C2 there in the race weekend. So you'll be able to tell, like, when we say medium, what do we mean? A yellow C2 would still be a pretty hard tire, pretty durable, maybe a little bit less grippy than you might normally expect from a medium tire.
Right.
So they made that easier to follow.
Every weekend we still will only have a hard, medium, and soft.
Yeah. But now the real ones will know what compound is that.
The C2, I know that one well.
So all the tires I just described are what's called slick tires. They're treadless tires, which in dry conditions is the absolute most mechanical grip you can get from a car. But obviously, if there's no treads, if it starts to rain, suddenly that tire stops working worth the damn, and you need something a little closer to road tires like you have on your car. And so that is where intermediate tires, and wet tires come into play. In practice, in recent years, you're going to see them continue to race on the intermediate tires, which is designed for, as the name implies, mixed conditions. It's not like a torrential downpour, but it's steady rain. The track is damp to wet, but it isn't like soaked. It's not like there's big puddles forming everywhere. And so that is what you're going to see the most of, because when the rain is heavy enough to make it advisable to run cars on full wets, even though F1 does historically tend to run in the rain, the issue that's cropped up in recent years is that the wets are so efficient at throwing water into the air. Basically, that's what the tread is doing, is channeling water out of the way of the tire and out of the way of the car, and then the wheel spin throws it into the air as a mist. Full wet tires make it possible for the car to still have good grip in rainy conditions, but they tend to create a fog bank that nobody can see. And so when the visibility gets sufficiently bad, they tend to bring out a red flag, which you'll come across. There's unsafe conditions. You can't continue to race. That's sometimes brought out by an accident, but it is also brought out for the rain is heavy enough, visibility is obscured. We need everyone to come into the pits, and we're going to wait this out. So You might see a little bit of racing on the full wets, but chances are that the full wet is the harbinger of the end of the race day. Intermediates are what you're going to see the most. The intermediates also have some interesting characteristics, and this is where F1 can get really interesting. When you have mixed changeable conditions, it's not fully wet, it's not fully dry. The wet tires with their tread are optimized for a track surface that has water on it. If there isn't enough water on the track, the tire will get very hot and begin to wear away very, very fast. When we talk about like what makes a tire work and what makes a tire last longer or shorter, usually we're talking about tire temperatures. All compounds have a preferred operating range of temperatures. Part of the driver's job and the engineer's job as well is to like make sure the car can run within those ideal ranges as possible to get the most grip and the least wear possible. Intermediate tires will, the second there's not enough water on the track, they begin to overheat and they begin to wear away. Now, it can get very funny. If they wear away sufficiently they no longer have tread, they start to operate like a slick. And sometimes you'll see people decide, well, now it's a slick tire, and I don't need to come in to the pits. I will just run the remaining part of the race on the inters, because the tread does make less grip in dry conditions. So when you have like a track that is a little bit damp, but is just entering that phase where like maybe you could run a slick on it, that's where you see teams making real decisions about how are we going to run the rest of this race. Do we want to risk it all and have someone drive on a slick tire on a wet track? That's where things get very, very exciting, and the stakes for this are very, very high because tire strategy is, really where you can win or lose a race. A lot of times, the car has to come to a dead stop, obviously, to change tires, but for safety reasons, the pit lane also has a speed limit. And so the entire, there's the concept we call the delta. There's a normal race pace, and then when you come in for a pit stop, when they run the stopwatch, for what that lap is, that's going to be a much, much slower lap, because in addition to the time you're stationary, you also have the speed limit that comes into play, and so you're very, very slow for that lap. That can massively change your position in the race. And so teams are trying to optimize for one of the best times to make a pit stop. And in mixed conditions, if you're deciding if you can skip a pit stop or have someone just avoid that cycle entirely, that is how some teams that have a lot to a lot of incentive to risk it all. That is how teams can have a huge strategic win by taking some risks, maybe pitting or not, depending on what they think their rivals are going to do. The pit stops are very, very fast. This is a place where the F1 teams invest a lot of money and research in creating the fastest equipment possible to change the tires. The teams have bespoke wheel guns that remove the nut on the tire. Every team's is different. So the teams have these things, they operate so fast and they practice so much that a 3-second stop is like table stakes. That is a competent pit stop. 2 seconds is really kind of the gold standard. Some teams have been able to get it to a little bit under 2. They had to put rules in place to make it you couldn't go faster. They have tried to make it slow it down, because sometimes teams were shaving a little too much off the safety margins for the pit stops for F1's taste. But that's the scale at which we're operating. If you see a car come in for a pit stop and it's like a 4-second stop, that's a disaster. You'll see mechanics walking into the garage, looking like they just kicked their dog. It is pure misery. So that's a lot of the stakes around the pit stops. All of it hinges on tire wear and tire strategy. You're going to hear people talking about as tires are wearing down, they are effectively throwing little chunks of rubber off the body of the tire onto the side of the track. As the race is run, the racing line, the fastest like path the cars can chart around the lap, will remain clean because the cars are all running in a row, and so the rubber that's discarded there is immediately picked up, and mostly the cars are throwing it to the side. Off the racing line, as the race goes on, will become increasingly covered in what they call marbles, these tiny little chunks of discarded rubber that act like ball bearings if a car drives over them. And so as the race goes on, if you go offline, say to pass somebody, you're effectively taking your car out on an ice rink. And that's not to say you can't do it, but it will be a slower line. It'll be more dangerous, but no risk it, no biscuit. And so that is a thing that sort of looms large in the minds of drivers as they're contemplating like how to attack and how to defend across a lap. You also hear about tire graining, which is effectively tires are supposed to abrade very smoothly and very naturally. Like they shouldn't look too different as they wear down. They should still have a nice smooth surface, basically, much like they did when they came out of their tire blankets, where they're kept in the garage to keep them nice and warm and toasty in that optimal temperature range. When you hear them talk about graining, effectively the tire is not in an optimal temperature window, and the way it is abrading is, well, it kind of looks like it's coming apart in grains. You will see the tire surface be like kind of pockmarked, and it's losing rubber kind of in chunks. Not ideal, but some tires pass through a graining phase before they sort of resume optimal performance. So it's tough to say whether graining is going to be a problem with how the tire is working, or if it is just a thing the tire has to pass through to continue operating well. But it does mean that when a tire is graining, things are a little more vulnerable. As tires wear down, they do get slower. They produce less grip, and so drivers have to brake earlier, take less speed through corners. Usually, this is a very slow process where lap by lap there's not much change. The car is just a little bit slower. It's very minuscule. But there is something called the tire cliff, where if you've gone through all the tire's optimal operating window and you're now running it way too long, suddenly that degradation stops being a gentle incremental curve and it becomes a cliff. Performance just falls. The way it would look on a lap time chart is it would be like a vertical climb, as suddenly each lap is taking much, much longer because the tire is so slow. You want to avoid the tire cliff. A tire that has gone over the cliff can sometimes be 2-3 seconds slower per lap, maybe more, as a driver is nursing it around. You are a sitting duck on a tire that's over the cliff. But things being what they are, sometimes there's incentive to risk hitting it, because if you can save a pit stop, that will be hugely advantageous to you. And so, they will run it as close to that cliff as possible. Obviously, part of the driver's art is proper care and feeding of the tire. Keep it in those nice temperature windows. Don't drive it like you stole it. Don't drive it like it's a video game. Have good habits with braking and cornering. Don't abuse the tires. But to err is human. One of the most common things you encounter are lockups. As you're approaching a corner, you hit the brakes, and rather than arresting the roll of the tires, what ends up happening is the axle basically just seizes and the tires stop rotating and they start skidding along the surface. This is actually much slower for slowing down the car. That doesn't work. The car is not braking effectively if that is happening. But also, as you might imagine, It's like you just take a plane and you're just like squaring off part of a circle. That is a flat spot when that happens, and when you flat spot a tire, you will feel that for the remainder of the tire's life. That the tire is no longer a perfect circle, and so there's a part where you're going around corners. And that is something you will feel through the steering, through the grip. The tire has been significantly compromised by getting flat spotted. That is a disaster if someone comes straight out of the pits and immediately flat spots the tires that they're supposed to run like 30 laps on. That's not good because now you still have to do 30 laps, but you've kind of screwed up the tire. Flat spotting is also, though, incredibly likely to happen on fresh tires because they're still kind of coming into their full effect. And so it's easy to misjudge these things as a driver. Just to close the loop, I think, on pit stops, Drew, do you want to tell people about the undercuts and the overcuts?
Yes. So like you said, pit stops are very costly in terms of time. Like a lot of times when the car is stationary, the team is moving really quickly and can sometimes get the car going again. And like you said, Rob, 2 or 3 seconds. But the whole process of a pit stop can take upwards of 20 seconds, which is a lifetime when you were talking about laps that are like 90 seconds total. So timing your pit stop is crucial. And you've got to take, like you said, the tire cliff into account, the health of your tires, how fast your car is going, when it is worth it to come in and do that pit stop. But you also have to take into account where your the other drivers on the track are. So one thing that the driver behind a car can do is to try what's called the undercut. So if you are chasing a car, an undercut means you pit first before them, and you have the advantage of knowing that they've ahead of you past the pit entrance. So you can say, okay, they're not pitting on this lap. Now I can. You pit first, and even though you are now 20 seconds behind them, your tires are new, and therefore you're going faster than them. And you know that eventually they're going to have to pit. So when they do pit, you have made up time on them. And they take their 20 seconds, but because your tires were faster at the time that they were still going, they come out behind you. Now, that doesn't always work, and there's a lot of like math involved. The teams are constantly, they've got, computers handling all this. In fact, one of my favorite parts is that you've got your on-site team, but then most teams have back at the factory, like, many countries away, a whole like mission control where they are watching screens and running, predictions that then they, call the team at the pit wall and say like, you need to pit now. It all feels very like Apollo mission to me. But yes, the undercut is when you come in first, get new tires, and by going faster, by the time your opponent pits, they come out behind you. There is a reverse of this called the overcut, where you stay out longer on the theory that you have faster laps still in you. And so after overtaking them during their stop, you will gain enough time on your old tires to have a safe gap. Is that clear? Did I say that right?
Yep. I think it's one of those things where it makes more sense in practice once you see it. Like once you see it in action, you will see the choices teams are making around this stuff. But it can be a little bit squirrely in the abstract.
Yeah. Danny did have to drop because his internet died. We'll get him back in a second. But while we're on these sort of lingo-y things, let's talk about some other things that you're likely to see and hear that to a new viewer may sound unfamiliar. I think something we might see a lot this year compared to last year is flashing lights on the back of a car. If it's a wet race, these lights will always be flashing because they want to make sure that the cars are easy to see. But in a dry race condition, a flashing light generally means that the car ahead of you is recharging their battery. And the light flashes because that means that due to the nature of the kinetic energy recovery, recharging means that the car might be slowing. So you want to let the driver know behind you that your car is going slower. You might see the cars. Usually this happens, or it doesn't happen during a race. It does happen during qualifying sometimes, that a car will be in the pit lane, gestured by the track officials to a weigh station where they actually weigh the weight of the car. Per the rules, the car has to be a minimum weight, which includes the driver, and they weigh the car and the driver separately. So you will see this after the race. They say, "Hey, great, congratulations, you won the race. Now please step over here on this scale. We need to weigh you." They weigh everybody after the race because they have the weight of the car and driver. They subtract the weight of the driver and they make sure that the car is not underweight. It's just logistically easier rather than making them all stay in the car and queue up at the weigh bridge. It's also useful for the driver's trainers to know how much they've lost in terms of their own weight in the race, which in a hot race like Singapore can be up to 8 pounds, like in water weight. These guys are athletes. Thankfully, they do have a drink system that they can use during these races to replenish their water supply.
Y'all like warm Gatorade?
Yeah.
I mean, this is because these things are not. I mean, this is the nature of open wheel racing in particular. Is that these things are not. There's no creature comforts with these things. So yes, they have a drink system. There's like a little Camelback built into the car, but the only place to put it is by where the power unit lives. The battery and the motor both generate tremendous amounts of heat. And so what they put into the car is usually like a frozen brick of Gatorade. It is the temperature of like lukewarm soup after just a few laps, basically. So like, yes, there's a drink system, and drivers will be happy to have it, but it's pretty gnarly. And yeah, it's also like you are, especially in hotter races, you're like approaching limits of like human endurance. Like famously, I think it was last year or the year before, George Russell basically had a heat stroke after a race. So like these things can creep up on drivers fast.
Yeah, and I think it was last year that a young rookie driver retired, like could not finish a race because he was cooking in his car, basically. One thing we didn't mention yet is the top speed of the cars. These things will do, there is no regulated top speed, but you will see them go above 220 miles an hour. Some other lingo here that you'll hear, box is synonymous with pit or pit stop. So you'll hear over the radio, instead of pit, they'll say box or box. Speed trap is another phrase you'll hear. That's just a section of the track where they go the fastest that they like to highlight for viewers. It's not like there's no regulations around that. There's no rules.
It's not the detection point.
Right. Yeah.
For like boost mode. Yeah.
Back marker means someone who is typically being lapped. So in like the rear of the field. And this is something that Danny will get into when he talks about flags. But, you know, even though these cars are very close in performance, over the course of a 2-hour race, the front runners will encounter the rear of the field, the back markers, and pass them. Rob, you want to describe over and understeer?
Yeah. So this is, actually, you're going to see a lot more of this. So in previous years, the cars were so heavy and the tires were so tricky to get in optimal ranges that they tended to have major problems with understeer, which is what most of us are familiar with, because road cars are generally tuned to have understeer, where you're turning the wheel, the car can't respond with enough grip to sort of follow the line you're giving it. You want to take a sharper turn, but the path the car is actually traveling is a much shallower turn. That is understeer. The car is understeering. That was one of the big problems in F1 for the last several years. It is a thing associated with like a less high performing car. Again, there's a reason road cars are tuned to have this through going to error in one direction. Oversteer is the opposite, where the back end will sort of make a very exaggerated snappy motion, and so you are trying to corner at a certain rate, and the car actually wants to bring its nose sharply into that turn, and now wants to cut a far sharper turn than you intended. And if you don't catch it, that is how spins happen. The cars this year appear to be much more prone to oversteering. Routinely during testing, you saw drivers have to, midway through a corner, basically wrestle the car, out of an oversteer moment in a way that a lot of them have not really had to contend with in a number of years. F1 cars always understeer and oversteer, and at certain corners, certain points. Part of drivers is like knowing how to handle those moments. But in general, F1 cars had problems turning in recent years. And oversteer was not a problem that you encountered as much in a properly set up F1 car. Suddenly this year, that's happening a lot. So you will see cars. The way oversteer looks a lot is like it will look like the back end is wobbling as a car is coming into or exiting a corner. And that's especially likely because the rear tires are where all the power comes from. And so, if you think about it, the rear tires are also trying to provide grip and cornering speed, but they're also trying to put power through. It's a big assignment, and sometimes those power that power coming off the back end can easily cause a car to spin out. That's what you're going to hear the most often is like when you see a driver spin the car, put it into a wall, following like not making a corner. Usually they will go back and they'll analyze. Oh, he just started accelerating too fast. He was on the power too soon, and caused a spike of oversteer and put himself out of the race. So that is a thing to keep an eye out for.
Another thing you'll probably hear a lot is, especially in qualifying, purple sector or going purple. This refers to the on-screen graphics. In qualifying, you will see times that the cars put up. If the font is in yellow, that means they haven't improved. If it is green, that means that they've improved on their personal best. And if it's purple, that means they are overall best. And that color can refer to either the overall best lap time or the best time in that segment of the track. And typically they're divided into 3 different sectors. So that's what that means.
The other thing, so purple is something to especially watch out for during the race, because purple sectors often indicate like how is the track performing. So like again, those mixed conditions where like should we be on wets or should we be on slicks? Teams will be watching to see is someone now like if someone is trying a tire strategy, they come out, are they setting purple times? If someone is on the right tire strategy, the course is now appropriate for being on an inter tire, and everyone else is still on slicks, but they weren't sure about it. The second someone who's on inters like starts setting purple times, that is an indicator that like, oh, it's time to change tires. So in the race, like purple time should be happening regularly because the cars are burning off fuel and getting lighter and getting faster. But sometimes the purple sector is also an indicator of course conditions, and that's a neat thing to look out for during tricky conditions.
Yeah. Another F1 or racing specific word you hear a lot is chicane. This describes a part of a circuit that is a quick left-right or a quick right-left turn. 2 sharp turns very close in succession. Another phrase is pit window. This again is not a regular. You'll see on the graphics like pit window lap 20 to 25. That's not a requirement for the cars to pit. That's just when we expect the cars to start pitting. And the last one here I have is parc ferme. This is closed park in French. It's basically a physical area and a designated time of the weekend where technical checks are done by officials to make sure that the cars are within regulation. For example, after qualifying, their cars will go into Parc Fermé, and during that time, no performance adjustments can be made to the car because they want to make sure that the car that qualified is the car that raced.
Yeah, they used to allow a lot more changes to happen across the weekend, but now it is very much a put your pencils down. It is time. The exam is over. The engineering side of the exam is over. Now it is time to go racing with what you brought.
And as you might imagine, there are many more rules and indeed penalties. So, Danny, what can you tell us about what you can and can't do?
Yes, there was no referee standing in the middle of the track throwing up yellow and red cards.
Fernando Alonso likes to imagine he's won.
That's what he's going to do when he retires. There's no NFL, throwing flags. Although, is there? Now that I think about it,
they're not on the field, but they are somewhere in a room.
The sport has many flags, but yes.
Let's talk about flags, shall we? So, so there's a bunch of marshals all around the track who are basically, usually local employees, and they are sent, they're there for the race, and they are sent messages and information from a smaller group of people who are essentially there to adjudicate over the race itself, watching it up in a little box and watching replays and things like that. And we're all downstream from this. So we're sort of in the same position of the drivers lots of times where something happens and then you're like, oh, I wonder how the stewards are going to react to this one. Some things happen on track, if there's a crash or an incident, and there's usually in a lot of these cases there's a sort of textbook way of approaching them, but the devil's in the detail a lot when it comes to the actual penalties themselves. So let's talk about the flags first of all. Whenever you see a green flag waving, that just means the track is, normal racing conditions are happening. You're good to go. Everything is normal and fine. Yellow flags, much like yellow cards, or those little flags in NFL that they throw on. This means that, there's something happening that you need to be aware of.
Or like a yellow light at the traffic.
Yeah,
traffic light.
You're right. Actually, that's a better one. Yeah, a yellow light at a traffic light. Essentially, it always means sort of be a bit aware and no overtaking at this part of the track. You can get a yellow flag in a section of the track or a corner or two. You can get one across the entire track as well. And the drivers are sort of made aware of that via not just the waving of the flags at the circuit, but also nowadays their digital displays on their wheels often highlight this as well and let them know. Yes, exactly. So if there's a single stationary yellow flag, this means no overtaking because there's a danger somewhere near the track, somewhere on the track sometimes, but it's not, maybe this piece of debris or something like that. Double yellows is a more serious version of this, which basically means, again, you're not allowed to overtake, but there could be something in the middle of the track. You need to really slow down and really be aware. So that happens if, cars crash, somebody breaks down, and they're stuck in the track. And it's obviously a way of stopping a car going at pace, hitting something that is stationary, which can be incredibly dangerous. The most serious of the flags is the red flag, which means that the session has stopped. It's basically the whistle that says we're done, we're not doing anything. And in a red flag, the cars essentially should crawl around the track and come back into the pit lane. That can happen for a number of reasons. It could happen because of a particularly bad crash. It could happen because some damage happened to the circuit itself, either from a crash or for some other reason. It could also happen if weather conditions get to a point where the stewards feel like it is just increasingly dangerous to drive. That can be torrential downpours of weather. It can also be lightning for instance, if storms come in with lightning, there's one element of the race that they have to be aware of, which is that for the safety of the drivers, they have a helicopter on site at all times there to medevac essentially people out. If weather conditions get to a stage where that helicopter is not in a safe position to be able to take off, they will also red flag the race, because that obviously takes the safety element away there. So in general, you're going to get some wave flags during the race. It just happens because cars break down, or a piece of carbon fiber comes off of someone's car because they touched. Red flags are rarer, but there will be a half dozen to a dozen red flags during a season for one reason or another, usually because of a bad crash or because the weather just got too crazy. But yes, generally we got some green flags.
We're
Sorry,
not
the gamer
playing Quake, Danny.
came out. No, we're not playing that one F1 Quake mod that we all love. Now let's talk about the weird flags. Some of these you'll see, some of these you won't see. Some of these maybe I've never seen or seen once or twice. So there's a yellow and red striped flag, which means specifically there is like some debris, usually like oil or some type of element on the ground that maybe they might not be able to see in that area, but it's like, trust us, there's something here you need to be aware of. And if it is a piece of roadkill, which has happened in F1 over the years, they rock the flag from side to side. So if you ever see a yellow and red striped flag getting rocked to side in Australia, for instance, first race of the season, could be a wombat, You don't want to hit that thing going 150 miles an hour.
They might do it also if the animal's still, walking around on the track. We get this with Canada.
That's true.
We get it in like Singapore. Giant lizards.
Yeah, there's always
It's crazy.
Giant lizards. Yeah, are the thing at Singapore, which is always bizarre. Rabbits have happened in F1 over the years. Foxes, things like that. So yes,
The drivers will risk life and limb to avoid hitting an animal. If they see an animal, you will see. So like in general, the drivers live in horror of striking a critter.
Probably for empathetic reasons, and also because they sort of drive around massive ice cream scoops, which direct the animals into their faces. I mean, the halo exists now, but it's like hitting a deer. You know what I mean?
Also,
like,
the aerodynamics are not good for the aerodynamics, which is like
really.
That might
aero.
actually have more to do with it. Like that, so much of the car used to be breakable or gum-uppable by like little bits of matter. And with simplified aero, maybe we'll see who the real monsters are.
Exactly. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's hard to do that stuff when you got chunks of rabbit ear. Rabbit foot though, maybe lucky. So keep your eyes peeled. Other ones that are sort of outside of the norm, the meatball flag, as we call it, which is a black flag with an orange circle in the middle. This is to let the driver know that they have a mechanical issue and that they need you to come in and have it rectified. Generally, this would be communicated via the radio, but if your radio has a mechanical issue, for instance, that might be tricky to communicate. If you don't heed to that flag, you're going to get in trouble. Oftentimes it's the stewards telling you that look, there's a piece of your car that's going to fall off, and your team is like happy for you to stay out, but we need you to come in because it might fly off. There is a half black, half white flag which they use for unsportsmanlike conduct. Honestly, this one is kind of rare. I can't remember the last time I saw this. It's basically
now also the one that they show if you bust the track limits more than the allotted amount of time. So if you go outside of the track limits, I think it's twice or three times you don't get a penalty, and they'll show you the black and white flag saying like you're on the bubble. And if you do it one more time, then you do get a penalty.
And generally, the stewards will tell the teams, and the teams generally tell the driver. There was one incident last year where they said to Lewis, like, "Oh, we've had 3 strikes," or 2 strikes, and he was like, when did we get one?
Right. Yeah.
They didn't update him, but that's more to do with Lewis and his ex compatriot on the pit, because they've actually swapped out that engineer now. He's not his guy anymore. Then there's the black flag, which often has a number associated with it. This is a disqualification, so this can be because you did not heed the black and white flag. It can be because some serious unsportsmanlike conduct. Lots of different reasons. So you can get black flagged in a race, and that means you need to come in. You are out of this. The checkered flag, which the black and white sort of checkered pattern, like a nice tablecloth. That is obviously the end of a race or a practice or qualifying, the end of the session itself, when they cross the line for the final time. And then the flag that you will see a bit more, even though it's sort of it's not necessarily to do with the rules or a threat on the track or anything like that, is more of a heads up for the driver, is the blue flag. So obviously, F1 races are long. Oftentimes people are on different pit strategies, and you get into situations where over the course of these very long races where they're driving for, accumulating dozens upon dozens of road miles essentially, where the drivers at the front of the race, the top 5, top 10, will often catch up with drivers at the back of the track. And then if that happens, you don't want the driver who's in first battling with position with the driver who is in 22nd, 21st, 20th. So in those situations, the driver who is the back marker, as they're known, is shown a blue flag to let them know that a car that is ahead of them is not racing them for position, is coming up, and they are basically required to make space for that car to be able to get around them as quickly as possible. Not just on the track, but also often slowing down to even allow them to do so safely. You're essentially required to just not make it as much work for that other driver to get past you. And it's just sort of taken, culturally within the, elements of fair play within the sport as a known quantity, that if you're at the back, you're going to have to just get out of the way and cede position and slow down a little bit to do that. So the blue flag is shown to them to let them know that somebody is coming up on them.
And it's a little counterintuitive because, you think, well, isn't everyone racing everyone all the time? But at this point, if you're being blue flagged, you are about to be a lap down. Now, you may also be battling with other people who are back markers. So the tricky part is moving over to allow the front runner through, but at the same time, not allowing the guy you are actually racing through.
Totally. And hoping as well that maybe if there's something in front of you that you can slow down a little bit less, in a good position, on a straight maybe, and let them pass there. And that maybe the next driver up will have to do it at a more complicated place and then has to slow down a bit more than you had to, and you can catch up. There's a whole sort of art unto itself when it comes to blue flags. And then the last thing with the flags is the safety car or the virtual safety car. So safety car, let's say that one first because it's the easiest. If, for instance, something happens on the track that requires the race to be neutralized, but as in stopped, but they don't want to red flag the race. So let's say a car is stricken, somewhere near the racing line, and they have to get on, either marshals have to run on and pick up debris, or they have to bring a truck on to lift that car off. They don't necessarily want to red flag the race because then everyone has to come to the pits. Everyone has to restart the race again. It just takes a long time. But they're thinking, it's going to take 2 or 3, especially with these new restarts, which we'll talk about. But maybe it's going to take 2 to 3 to 4 laps to clear all this sort of stuff. They basically send out a safety car, which looks like a road car. It's not an open wheel car. It's actually a very, souped up sports car, but, so it can actually set a pace that's similar to these cars. these F1 cars. And essentially this will lead the pack. It'll become like a follow the leader thing where this car drives around at a decent clip, but like nowhere near
It
race
looks
pace.
like it's going as fast as it can, but right behind the F1 cars look like they're going extremely slowly. It's really funny.
Yeah, it looks like they're
Yeah.
crawling, but they're probably doing like 70,
Right.
80 miles an hour or something. You know what I mean? So the safety car will come out. It has big flashing lights on it. And when the safety car comes out, when the safety car pops up, the race is basically like, slow down.
Yeah,
You
don't
know,
pass
get
anybody.
down to safety
Just
car
get
pace.
behind this car. And,
Yeah. And it bunches up the pack. So, you know, if you were 10 seconds ahead of the person behind you, then once the safety car comes out, you're going to be, you know, a second less, half a second ahead of them. You all get bunched up. And at a certain point, the safety car drives in and people essentially start racing again from that backed up position. There is another thing that they added now that we have this sort of, you know, better networking and communications that modern technology affords. They have something called the virtual safety car, which is introduced to essentially do the thing the safety car does, which is slow everyone down. But instead of, again, having to create this scenario where we have to wait for the safety car to go out first, and we have to wait for the safety car to get in front of the pack leader, and then it has to come in. There might be a situation where there's an area of the track that has something on it, but we're going to get it cleared. They do something called the virtual safety car. And essentially what it does is it sets a sort of speed and speed requirement for the drivers to slow down to, and they have to retain the delta time between them and the car in front of them has to be within a certain window. So essentially it's like, okay, we're letting you all slow yourselves down. Don't try and overtake. Don't try and cut some time in front of the person in front of you. You have to slow down so we can safely fix this thing. And then hopefully after a lap and a half or 2 laps of this, we will turn off the virtual safety car and you can go racing again.
Yeah.
So it all depends on the sort of scenario that the race stewards are attempting to fix.
Yeah, the thing about the virtual safety car is it's designed to maintain the gaps that you have, as the driver, have eked out from your rivals, versus the real safety car, which eliminates those because you have to bunch back up. So it's effectively like everyone slows down together, and then when it's done, we lift it back up, and it's like the race just continues the way it was.
Yeah, exactly.
Penalties, Danny.
Yes, if you don't follow the rules, then this is where you get a little slap on the wrist. And penalties are, again, sort of open to interpretation. You know, like so many penalties in sports, you know, maybe you know a red card tackle if you see it. Or
Is
maybe,
that pass interference? Yeah.
Exactly. There's a lot of that. And F1 is no stranger to this, of course. So let's go through them sort of in order of severity. And I'll try and give examples of what would constitute one or the other. So, you know, the simplest one you get is like a 5-second penalty. So this could be added to essentially your position at the end of a race, or which is usually the case. We'll talk about stop goes and stuff in a second. So this can be for, again, like cutting corners too much, things like that, common small infringements, stuff that, you know, you need to get a slap on the wrist for it, but it's not the craziest thing. A 10-second penalty is for essentially the same thing except a higher degree of severity when it comes to what you did. So, you know, what do we think about a 10-second penalty? That could be hitting another car, maybe like diving up the inside.
Yeah, it's usually egregious stuff.
But again, devil's in the detail
Sure.
here, interpretation, right?
They've also, these things are sometimes being under review a lot among the drivers because the 5-second penalty used to be the standard, the standard fare for most minor infractions. And then people realized, well, you just don't serve that, and the 5 seconds is trivial.
Yeah, if you cut a corner,
there's been a move to
you could
stiffening the penalties to
Yes.
make it so that you can't get an advantage. Because it turns out 5 seconds is very cheap if you end up with favorable track position.
Yeah.
Which is why we have ones that are even more serious than that, such as the drive-through penalty. So obviously there are you know, pits in in an F1 race, pit stops where drivers come in and change their tires. Whenever you do that, it obviously takes a chunk of time, not just the time that they're sitting there, getting lifted up, tires coming off, tires going on, but also the time lost while in that pit lane, because you obviously have to slow down to a certain speed limit for everyone's safety and also to stop the car and start the car. So oftentimes, there's like a 25 to 30 second loss in time while going in and out of the pits. Maybe a bit more for some of them. So one penalty they have is a drive-through penalty, which essentially is you have to come through the pits, but you can't stop your car. You just got to drive through. That's it. You got to go through the Denny's takeout window. Denny's was the wrong choice. They don't do that. McDonald's, Burger King. You have to drive through, but you cannot stop and get your food. You got to just keep going. And this is for, again, like sort of constantly cutting corners, cutting chicanes, skipping track limits, which is like driving outside of what we have deemed is the actual racetrack itself. Things like that where you are perhaps gaining an advantage on time. Slap on the wrist. We're going to take some of the time away from you. The worst version of this is the stop-go penalty. And this is like the drive-through, except you have to go into your pit box and you have to stop for 10 seconds. You got to sit there. No one can touch your car. If you want to change your tires after that, that's fine. And that's generally what happens is people go,
is that true?
Oh, well.
I know.
After the stop go?
For a stop go penalty, I don't think you can touch your car. I think if you get a 10-second penalty and you serve it in your pit box, then you can.
Sorry, you're right.
But I think with a stop go, I think
right.
you have to park and then leave. And if you want to pit, you have to come in again.
Yeah, that's true. Sorry. Yes, the 5 and 10-second penalties, sometimes people will like add them into a pit stop generally.
Yeah, so if you're handed a regular 5-second penalty, and you don't have and you don't pit again in the race, they just tack it on to the end of your end time. If you do pit after you've received a penalty, you have to serve that 5 seconds in the pit box. And that's where no one can touch your car until 5 seconds are up. And this is really fun. Like you'll see someone on the pit wall has a stopwatch, and then they all hear in the radios, okay, go. And then everyone pounces on the car. It's really funny.
Yes, and there has been instances where people have accidentally touched a tire or something and then invalidated that stop, and then they had to come back and do it again. But yeah, sorry, but thanks for clearing that up. The stop-go itself is one where, yes, you can come in, stop, and then you got to go out. And it's because of the severity, like you end up losing like a minute almost of time doing this.
It's probably like 40 seconds. Yeah.
This is something like, you've done something that is a massive benefit to you, like jumping a start at the start of the race, or doing something egregiously unfair or dangerous, like speeding in the pit lane, ignoring overtaking blue flags, things like that, or doing like insanely egregious versions of blocking cars, in braking zones or multiple movements on the straight if someone's trying to overtake you, stuff like that. So it's pretty much the worst one they can give you. There's also grid position penalties that you can get for like 5 spots, 10 spots. This generally tends to happen when people break parc fermé rules, which is essentially they have done some sort of modification to their car at a period during the race weekend, which is deemed a time window where you're not allowed to change stuff. And teams will sort of tactically do this. They'll be like, well, look, we're going to lose some grid positions on this. We're going to have to start from the back, but this engine or this part of the engine is not working properly, and it's going to basically tank our race. So we're just going to take the hit on this. We're going to do this and then serve the grid position as a result. The other only situation is if something sort of again on the more serious side happens at the end of a race. They may decide to punish you for the next race rather than just sort of, giving someone a 14 to 10-second penalty at the end of a race is really not going to move the needle in any way. They're not going to get any points.
Or,
anyway.
if you T-bone another car and you both go out, then a time penalty is not going to do anything. So they might hand you a grid drop.
yeah, if you were the one responsible, they want to be able to make sure, obviously, that you take some sort of penalty for it. Then there is the 10 place penalty, which happens after you get 5. What do we call these? They're not points?
Yeah, they're
on your
they're-
license,
yeah,
but they feel similar.
The stewards can hand you a reprimand, which is like a, hey, we saw that. We're not going to give you a penalty now, but if you keep it up and they accrue, then we're going to give you a grid penalty. Same way, like race bans work the same way. If you accrue, and these come in the form of points on your license. So if I crash into somebody, they're going to say, that one was bad. Not all incidents are intentional, but if they deem that this was an egregious error on your part, they're going to hand you a couple points on your license. And if you accrue 12 points in a calendar year, it's a rolling window, then they'll hand you a race ban, which we've seen relatively recently.
Penalty points exist in the UK for sure. I think Ireland, we might have them, but you don't do that here, right? In the States?
For
You
normal
don't have-
drivers? No,
yeah,
I don't think
on
so.
your license, no. So if you get involved in like a crash or you get a speeding ticket or something like that, you will get a penalty point added to your license, and then
That's
you do lose your license if you get a certain amount of them within a certain
know
time.
that.
Yeah, so it's basically the same law applied to this sport. And then so or you could race bans you can also just be handed out if something crazy happens as well. We don't tend to see that stuff, which says more about the quality of the driving at this level than probably anything else, but that is thankfully the case. But the issue here again is that a lot of the time you can tell why someone's getting a certain penalty or why a certain flag is getting waved, but there are elements of this sport that are a little bit open to interpretation. We are going to run afoul of this, the early stages of this new regulation change season, I suspect, quite a lot, especially with the way in which the power is deployed on straights, and also how harvesting is done on corners for energy. I suspect that this is going to be a little bit tricky. So let's give a sort of as broad an overview position as to what is constituted fair defending of your position into a corner, right? So we've talked a lot about, blue flags, somebody is a back marker, you're overtaking them. Most of the not most, but like the exciting overtakes you will see on television will be ones for position, where somebody who in second is trying to get into first, where somebody in 12th is trying to get into 10th, no matter what it is. And obviously, if you're the car defending that position, you want to make it as difficult as possible for that person to try and overtake you. And generally, that means picking a certain part of the track that you are going to occupy, and then picking a certain direction of travel around a corner that you're also going to occupy. And so the only other available option is the part of the track that you're not on. What I'm getting towards is that you can't just swerve around in front of the car in front of you to stop them from getting past. You also can't just randomly change direction in a corner or brake too early or brake check somebody. There's things that you're not allowed to do within the sort of sporting code. And a lot of this has got to do with safety, because these cars are super expensive, super fast cars, and they're made out of cheap plastic, it'll look like. They're made out of very expensive carbon fiber. But when they hit each other, they fall apart, they crash, and then you've got somebody sitting in an open container with a helmet flying through the air into a barrier. So they have to establish some sort of rules about defending. And of course, because this is a competitive sport, people are going to try and skirt around those rules or stretch those rules as much as they can. So some general points to understand about this: you're not allowed to make abnormal changes in direction if you are the defending car. So that means that you can't just I'm drifting over to the right of the track and then I'm going to come back over to the left, right? that type of thing, that type of subterfuge or whatever can create bad incidents, right? So again, you're already imagining this in your head and thinking, well, shouldn't you try and outsmart the car behind you? Yes. What's an abnormal change in direction? Exactly. This is the problem with any sport, and F1. This is the issue they run into. Making like double movements. So if you are on a straight and somebody's going to try and dive up the inside, let's say the right side of the track, you are allowed to block them. You are not allowed to block them a second time. You can't just keep swerving back and forth. Similarly, if you're in like a braking zone and it looks like you are the one that instigates the movement, into the inside of a turn, but then you cut back over to the other side because of the nature of how cars brake in F1. Like generally cars in F1, you play like drifting video games, you watch action movies, you hit the brakes and you turn. If you hit the brakes in an F1 car, it's basically going straight. So if you are, weaving in the braking area and then the car behind you hits their brakes and then you go back in front of them, crash is going to happen. So you got to be careful about that as well. So you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to block super late. If you were entering a corner and you've decided which part of the corner you're going to be braking into, you can't just suddenly decide to change at the last second when everyone's in their braking zone. And then the other thing is when cars are side by side into turns, they're trying to overtake each other. They're on a straight. You can't just run the other car off the track. You can't instigate contact between people. You have to leave a gap between the cars. It is crazy how good these drivers are about leaving the smallest gap. Sometimes the wheels are sort of like inside of each other, as it were, like somebody's front wheel is between the other two. Yeah, interlocked, exactly. That's all fine. A gap is the smallest amount of space you can imagine in F1. And incidents often happen because somebody's braking a little bit too late or turning in a little bit too much. And oftentimes cars will hit each other and take each other out. And they'll just put it down to a racing incident. This is not something we need to punish one of you for. It was fair racing, but you both fell a cropper of just the rules of the game.
Yeah, I mean, it'll take some watching, but I think it'll become apparent. This is something that you'll get better at after watching a lot of racing, is sort of identifying. Rob is rocking his hand back and forth. But there is fudge factor all over the place.
That is the thing. If you're familiar, for instance, with American gridiron football and the perennial debates, but what really is a catch? That is kind of what happens in F1 when it comes to these driving standards.
Was that a footballing move?
Yeah, because there's a lot of this is in the eye of the beholder. For instance, you're allowed to regain the racing line heading into a corner, so you can make your blocking move down the straight, and then as someone is trying to maybe move around you, but there's a corner coming up, you can regain the correct line for taking the corner, and that just happens to block someone else. And that introduces ambiguity that is frequently adjudicated by a rotating cast of racing officials who try to figure out what's fair racing and what's outside the rules. And then the drivers themselves are frequently on the radio lobbying. Clearly, they're talking to their race engineer, complaining about what has just happened or their read on the incident. But it is clearly meant for the consumption of racing officials, so that it is sort of like loudly proclaiming one's innocence, that you cannot imagine that you would be penalized for something, or that someone else would not see the other guy was at fault. So this is a thing where you will see these things in practice, and you will internalize more of the logic of these rules. You will never fully feel confident about how those rules are being interpreted and applied, because the drivers aren't either.
All right. Well, how do you actually watch these races? And this is something that's also changed this year. In the US, you have one option. You must have a subscription to Apple TV, which is $13 a month or $99 a year. My advice is once you've gotten that subscription to watch using F1's official app, which is called F1 TV. And it's available on basically every kind of streaming box or smart TV. Though you will need to link it to your Apple TV account. The F1 TV app will give you access to live sessions, on-demand replays. They've got 30-minute highlight edits of the races, which are convenient if you're in a hurry, as well as a historical archive of hundreds of old races and sessions for the F1 feeder series like Formula 2 and the F1 Academy, which is the development program for female drivers. There's also the official F1 YouTube channel, which provides highlights of each session with the races being edited down to about 7 minutes. Same with qualifying. That's usually how I consume practice sessions is on YouTube. Though I know many of our listeners just watch the YouTube race highlights and then listen to our podcast to get the full picture. So you've got some options. And speaking of commercial rights, let's take it to one more commercial break, and then we'll be back with an overview of the teams and drivers. All right, so we've found that a lot of newcomers to F1 were introduced to it by watching Drive to Survive on Netflix, and I'm sure now the F1 movie will have done something similar. So if you're coming in after watching one of those...
Brad Pitt is not in F1. Just I want to get that edited away. That was Hollywood magic.
Yes, there are no people in their 50s. We have some 40s in the field.
Fernando's he's trying it. He's going to get there.
I guess if you're wondering, I think we generally gave a thumbs up to the F1 movie. We have a whole episode on Patreon where we talk about it. If you want to hear that.
It's a popcorn flick. It's kind of silly, but it's good.
Yeah, and it's not surprising that those are effective on-ramps because they do a great job of showing the human drama of the sport. And it just like it pays to understand the technicalities of the sport, knowing the people really adds to the experience. So with that, we're going to go through every team and driver on the grid. Like I said, there are 2 drivers per team. The concept of teammates in F1 is a little weird. They do sometimes work together. For instance, if 2 teammates are on track, one behind the other, the car behind may be ordered to defend against another attacking team. But that is only if the driver listens to their team's orders. Usually they do, not always. Every driver out there thinks that they are the best, and they all especially want to beat their teammates because they are the only ones with the same machinery. So it's a pretty poor reflection of your ability if your teammate beats you every time in effectively the same car. Before we get to the teams and drivers, a quick note about how to tell them apart on track. Each team has a different paint job, which we call a livery, but the cars within the same team look almost identical. The major difference between them is the color of their camera pod, which is sometimes called the T-bar, because it looks like a squat letter T sitting on top of the car just behind the driver's head. One driver will have a black T-bar, while the other will have a fluorescent yellow one. Typically, it's the more senior driver with the black one, but that's not always the case. So be on the lookout for our official spotter's guide as we get closer to the first race that we'll put out on the Shift+F1 social accounts. And then as we go through this, you'll also hear what engine each team has in their car. This can get a little confusing. A lot of the teams will have names that you've heard of, like Mercedes and Ferrari. In addition to being F1 teams, some of those teams also make their own engines, which are called works teams, and then sell those engines to other teams, which are called customer teams. So with each team breakdown, we'll mention the engine manufacturer, and we do it not just because it's a piece of trivia, but especially this year, engine performance can really affect how good your car is. So it's valuable context to have. All right, so we're going to go in championship order from how they finished last year, starting
in the Constructors
Constructors Championship. Starting with Danny.
McLaren. McLaren won the Constructors' Championship last year. They did so the year before that, which was kind of cool because the previous years it was Red Bull, Red Bull, Red Bull, Red Bull for a long time. So yes, they came first last year. They are the orange car, or papaya, as they like to call it. But yeah, you can't miss them. Big old orange car. Of course, McLaren, founded by Bruce McLaren, famous not just Formula One driver, but many different. He was a great engineer as well, New Zealand-born driver. The team's been around since around the 80s. They're generally a sort of luxury car brand in the UK. They make high-performance, very expensive cars. You know, not your street cars that your grandmother's gonna buy. These are like incredibly high performance. You know, unless you've got
they
a
make
really
Ferraris
cool
look affordable.
grandmother. What'd you say?
Like, they make Ferraris look affordable.
Yes,
Is the tier
essentially,
they
yeah.
operate at. It is a ridiculously high end brand.
Yeah, so you've either got the coolest granny in the world and richest, or you will never step foot in one of these cars. Generally, you know, I think I saw a P1 one time in London or something. They are based in the UK. They run a Mercedes engine. The nationality of the team is also UK. The team principal is Andreas Stella, who moved over from, I'm blanking. Well, he was at Renault, right?
Don't remember.
Prior to here. I'm trying to remember.
You don't see him very
C-
often because you normally just see the big American CEO.
Yes, Zach Brown, the CEO, is a man made famous by, well, I guess his first claim to fame was that he was it The Price is Right? Is that what
I think it was Wheel of Fortune.
Wheel of Fortune. He won some money and then turned it into a go-karting career and then did some racing and has been the CEO of McLaren and has turned it around. You know, a couple of fits and starts over the past 10 years, different driver combinations, but between the current two drivers they have, which I'll talk about in a second, and the advancements they made with the car itself, he has managed to drive them towards 2 constructor championships and now a drivers' championship as well. The driver who won that championship is UK. Well, he wasn't UK born, but British citizen, Lando Norris. He won last year. He is 26 years old. Lando has been in the sport for many, many years. He was part of a generation of younger drivers that came in and, were competent drivers. Mentality with Lando was the thing for a while. There was a couple of races where he almost got on the podium, almost won in Russia about 4 or 5 years ago now, but was never able to stick the landing. So last year when he did win the championship, it was a real testament to sort of who he has become as a driver, and not just his skill, but his mentality, because the issue he ran into was that he wasn't just fighting Max Verstappen, a multiple world championship winner. He was also racing a very tricky teammate in Oscar Piastri, 2 years his junior, at age 24. Oscar is an Australian, and last year he ultimately placed third. But he was leading the championship for a number of months last year. He, forced Lando to sort of up his game, as did Verstappen's slow encroachment back into that top 3 of the races. But Oscar, like I said, was leading the championship for a chunk of last year, had a couple of, dodgy races, a little bit of bad luck as well, and ultimately ceded it to Lando. The season did eventually come. It came down to the last race in that mathematically it was possible for 3 drivers to win it, but it would have required Lando to have engine trouble or a particularly bad final performance. As it happened, Oscar drove a great final race as well, but ultimately came in third because Max pipped him as well. So yeah, they have a great, set of drivers. They have a champion. They are champions, but ultimately this year with the new regulations, it's all going to come down to how the aero and the power and the batteries all work. And for that, I think we're going to talk about testing a little bit after this team rundown, and it's hard to tell right now between the top 3 or 4 teams who's really got the car.
Lando apparently was born in the UK. His mother, though, is Belgium. So
I thought he was born.
has Belgian citizenship as well. Apparently, and I'm just learning this now. His mother has stated that, his mother gave him the name Lando, which he says was not inspired by Lando Calrissian. So,
not everything is a Star Wars reference.
Can color me surprised.
Yeah, I was sure he was. Oh, whatever. It doesn't matter where he was born.
Next up, Mercedes. They placed second in the Constructors' Championship last year. They are the silver and teal car. They run their own engine, a Mercedes engine. The team is technically, you have the official entry is German, and it's weird. A team registers via an auto club of a specific country, and then that is their official entry into Formula One. All their factories are in England, as a lot of the factories for these teams are. Their team principal is an Austrian man named Toto Wolff, who sounds exactly like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Until 2021, Mercedes had won the previous 7 drivers and constructors championships. But after that, they really struggled to get on top of their car. There was kind of a regulation change that they went down an incorrect path. Last year, they really started looking better, and we expect that trend to continue. Their drivers are George Russell. He's 28 from the UK. Last year finished 4th in the Drivers' Championship. Very much the British gentleman. I think Rob once described him as a Spitfire pilot. He had developed a reputation for buckling under pressure, had a lot of late race crashes, but that has changed recently. He's had a string of really solid finishes, and he's hungry for a championship. He also apparently made the case to Toto Wolff to sign him to the Mercedes driver program with a PowerPoint presentation. So,
yeah, teacher's pet.
His teammate, Andrea Kimi Antonelli. They call him Kimi Antonelli. He is 19 years old, Italian. Last year placed 7th in the Drivers' Championship. This is his second year in the sport after he started last year with Mercedes as a rookie. There was sort of a lot of young phenom hype around him when he came in, but instead of setting the world on fire, I'd say he came off as capable, but still a little green. I expect this year a lot of those rough edges are going to be sanded off, and I'm excited to see what he can do. Next up, Danny.
Yeah, Red Bull. Red Bull are it's a drink. It's got taurine, it's got sugar, it's got, it's what you need to start your day of trucking. It's what Red Bull is. Red Bull have obviously been in a bunch of sports over the years. They invest in lots of crazy stuff. But their investment into Formula One started back in 2005. And between the period of 2010 and 2013, 2014 even as well, they were dominant. You know what I mean? Like, they won 4 championships there in a row between 2010 2013. They were second either side of that. And then Mercedes were dominant for the next sort of 6-7 years. Shout out to all of your children who are now doing the hand movement because of what I just said. And then they managed to sort of get back into contention again in the past couple of years. They won the constructor in 2022 and 2023, which were the 2 central years of Max Verstappen, one of their drivers, 4 championships that he won in a row between 2021 and 2024. So they have had fits and starts of being the most dominant team. They've had on and off sort of years with that. The constructors ultimately eluded them the past 2 years because of the rise of McLaren. And they ended up coming in 3rd overall. So they are a dark blue and yellow car. Generally, you can spot them because they have a big Red Bull on the side of the car. This year, they are running their own engines. They have built their own powertrain company in collaboration with Ford Motorsport to essentially bring what was an external partner, and they're bringing it in, which is risky, but we'll see how it works out for them. Much like the Red Bull company, they are based in. They are an Austrian team. They actually own their own circuit, the old A1 ring, which is now known as the Red Bull ring, or the Österreich ring, which just means Austrian ring. But yes, as Drew said, like everyone else, they are essentially based in the UK. Like almost everyone else, they're based in the UK. Their team principal is Laurent Mekis, who replaced the Drive to Survive famous and Spice Girl husband, Christian Horner, during last season after, multiple sort of
So much drama.
issues caught up with him. Yeah, it's a whole other... We could do a preseason primer on Christian Horner, but we're not going to do that, thankfully. So yes, Larmekis is the team principal, and he'll be running the show. The drivers are Max Verstappen, who is 28 years old. He's Dutch. His father was an F1 driver, Jos Verstappen. Max, a 4-time world champion. He is largely considered the best driver of his generation. He is probably in contention for one of the best drivers of all time. He is incredibly talented across multiple different aspects of motorsport. Smart guy, very great mentality as well. He came second last year after being out of contention halfway through the season. Somehow managed to wrestle that car back. And this has been a problem with Red Bull for a long time, which is that Max is so good and he is able to drive the car on the limit that his teammates struggle to drive that same car anywhere near his pace. In fact, they would probably be happier in a different car because it would be easier to drive. His teammate for this year is a young Frenchman called Isaac Hadjar, or Isaac Hadjar as we tend to call him. Last year he placed in 12th with Red Bull's sister team, which we'll talk about in a second, who are currently called Racing Bulls. That's not confusing. Listen to our entire preseason podcast on the naming convention of this team because it's just gotten ridiculous over the years. Hadjar had a dodgy start to the last season. He made some early mistakes. He seemed mentally frail, let's say. But over the course of last season, he showed incredible racecraft, incredible mental acuity, and ultimately found himself in getting the second seat at Red Bull, which, has been a rotating cast for the past while. I mean, Sergio Perez was in there for a while, but last year they went through Liam Lawson, Yuki Tsunoda. Nobody could seem to handle the car. So we're all hoping that Isaac does a great job and doesn't fall afoul of the second Red Bull seat like so many talented drivers before him.
All right, Ferrari, Rob.
Ferrari is probably the most famous team in F1, damn near synonymous with the sport. They finished 4th last year, and it was a grim season, as they often have been. The team has had legendary drivers for it: Niki Lauda, Michael Schumacher. Michael Schumacher led it to a dominant period in the late 90s, early 2000s, but it has been a long fallow period since then, with a lot of unease, unrest at the company as they try to find a winning combination. They're based out of Italy, and they do make their own engine. That is sort of the heart of the team, is a history of racing development. Currently, they are led by Fred Vasseur, a well-regarded team principal with a long history in motorsport, who sort of looked to as someone who could turn things around at Ferrari, but things have not quite worked out that way ever since. And the team also is pursuing kind of a 2-track strategy with its drivers. For a long time, their primary driver, the person they were clearly building their future around, was Charles Leclerc, a driver from Monaco, who was part of that young driver cohort that Danny alluded to. They were very quick to sign him to a long-term contract. But then last year, they brought in six-time world champion? Seven-time world champion Lewis Hamilton, who was dominant at Mercedes, also won a championship with McLaren, one of the best drivers in the history of the sport, but has had some tough years lately as Mercedes form declined, and his first year at Ferrari was disastrous, and the vibes, I would say, were bad, not just for him, but also Charles Leclerc. Ferrari is a team that probably gets more shit than they deserve because they're so famous, and they're sort of known for making hilariously, like, ill-timed errors, but it does seem to have gotten into the water supply there, and the vibes, I would say, are bad. The drivers both seem to struggle with depression just from being Ferrari drivers, and that's not really an exaggeration for comic effect. They do seem pretty bummed a good portion of the season with what is happening at that team.
Williams are next. Last year they placed fifth, which is higher than they have placed in many, many years. They were sort of bottom of the barrel for a little while there. Founded, long time ago by Frank Williams and Patrick Head. It's sort of a classic British team. They run in Mercedes engine, and they are blue and white. They're one of the teams that are sometimes hard to pick out because there's a lot of blue and white out there on the track. British team, like I said, their team principal, not to be confused with James Consonants. His name is James Vowles. He's a very interesting gentleman. He speaks in a very beautiful, posh British accent. And if you watch Drive to Survive, you're probably very familiar with him. Their two drivers couldn't have more different starts and entrances into Formula One. Alexander Albon is a 29-year-old Thai driver. Grew up in the UK, but races under the flag of his mother's nation, one that he's very connected to, obviously himself. Placed
Which is Thailand.
last year in
Did you say
8th
that?
position.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. Well, I said he was Thai, but yeah. Yes, and has a very interesting entrance story into Formula One. His teammate Carlos Sainz Jr. is the son of a very famous, largely rally-focused driver, Carlos Sainz. Jr. is age 31 now. He is Spanish. Last year he placed 9th, so they were 8th and 9th, right behind each other. Both very talented drivers who have never really found the car to put them sort of in contention for a championship. Will Williams have one this year? We'll have to wait and see.
Racing Bulls, as we mentioned, this is the sister team to Red Bull. There are limits about how much technical information you can share with another team. But in the past, Red Bull has, as we've said, sort of used this team as kind of a farm system for its younger drivers. This team is based in Italy. They also have a factory or an office in the UK, but they are an Italian team. They used to be called Toro Rosso, which was Italian for Red Bull, which I think was a much cooler name. They also use the Red Bull Ford engine, which is new for this year. They are a white and yellow car. Their drivers are Liam Lawson, who is 24 from New Zealand. Last year he placed 14th. He, like many drivers, including Alex Albon and a few more that we'll get to, was one of those promoted to Red Bull to partner Max Verstappen, only to last a handful of races before getting demoted. But like many of those drivers before him, he has seemed to flourish after that. So hoping to see more from him this year. He is partnered by, I think, the field's only rookie this year, Arvid Lindblad. Love Formula One names. He's 18 from the UK. He has a good history with former or the lower tiers. He won the prestigious Macau Grand Prix in Formula 4 in 2023, placed 4th in the F3 Championship a year later, and came 6th in F2, becoming the youngest F2 F2 winner in history. I personally have not seen him race, but Red Bull tends to produce good drivers, so I am assuming, or I'm eager to see how he does. It's, all going to be down to how good the car is. Racing Bulls, I feel like, is either an afterthought or they really impress you. Rob, Aston Martin.
Oh, fascinating team. we haven't gone into the fact that a lot of teams have changed names over the years and have been one organization owned by multiple people. That is relevant here with Aston Martin. They were a team that was sort of a plucky, scrappy underdog when they were Force India. That team sort of collapsed because the Indian drinks billionaire who owned the team, Vijay Mallya, got in some legal issues, kind of maybe sort of went on the run for a little bit, trying to evade said legal issues, but he lost his control of the team and they became a semi-independent organization as Racing Point before being rescued by billionaire Lawrence Stroll, who was brought into F1 to support his son Lance's racing ambitions, and so ultimately was so involved in the sport and so all in on his son's career that he bought an entire racing team. But like Saturn devouring his children, Lawrence Stroll seems to have taken his son's dream and turned it into his own. Lawrence took over the team and began directly running it, moving its longtime team principal out of his role, and bringing in his own people to sort of oversee the building of a top-shelf F1 organization, and he spared no expense in doing it, and the results have been shit. Since he sort of put his stamp on the team, its results have collapsed. He has a son, Lance, driving for the team, who I think is probably described as a marginal F1 driver, clearly good enough to be on the grid, does not often demonstrate that he is someone particularly worth keeping around if he were not the boss's son. He is paired with Fernando Alonso, a two-time champion who may have brought a jinx to Aston Martin because Fernando Alonso's career has been spent trying to find more championships and better cars, and everywhere he goes, the team gets worse. And then he leaves just as the team is about to start turning things around. There's often debate about whether or not these two factors are related and whether Fernando is quietly part of the problem. But he is extremely well regarded. He's very smart. He's a very sharp driver. And so I think you'll hear the commentators extend him a lot of benefit of the doubt and give him a pass on a lot of things. But in particular, this year is cursed for resonant reasons because part of Aston Martin turning things around was sparing no expense and recruiting Adrian Newey, an F1 aerodynamics engineer who's worked for just about everyone and gave Red Bull some of its most dominant cars over the past 15 or so years. He was placed in charge of the team, given a king's ransom to develop an unbeatable car. And then Aston partnered with Honda for their engine. Honda having just produced World Championship winning cars again with Red Bull, with a catch. Honda was quitting F1 just as Red Bull started winning. They stuck with that plan. Red Bull basically hired all the people who built Honda's engine. And so Honda started from scratch for Aston Martin, and the results, judging by what happened at testing, have been nightmarish. Both the drivers are depressed, saying the car is potentially 3 or 4 seconds slower per lap than the other teams, which in F1 terms, you're basically not even in the same series. That is you will be lapped twice before that race is over. So things are going really well over there, and Aston Martin is fun and instructive for an example of what happens when sort of a finance class actually tries to operate things as opposed to just taking credit for it. And so it's sort of morbidly fascinating from that standpoint.
Also somewhat fascinating, the Haas team. They are, until Cadillac, they were the newest F1 team on the grid, having started from scratch in 2016. They're owned by American businessman Gene Haas, whose company makes CNC machines, which are basically factory robots, which is a little ironic because this team is famous for keeping costs down by buying as many parts as legally possible from Ferrari. This has lessened a bit over the years. They make more of the car themselves these days. If you've watched any of the early seasons of Drive to Survive, you may remember their former team principal, Gunther Steiner, who oversaw a real roller coaster of an F1 team. Now it's headed by Ao Komatsu, who seems to be quite capable and basically the exact opposite of Steiner in terms of affect. They are red and white. They have a Ferrari engine, naturally. They have bases in the US, UK, and Italy, and their drivers are Oliver Bearman. He's 20, from Britain, from the UK. Last year, he placed 13th. He made his debut in an F1 car in a Ferrari when Carlos Sainz had to have emergency surgery for appendicitis. He went on to impress last year, frequently beating his much more experienced teammate. Haas isn't likely going to be fighting for wins, but Bearman is fast, and I'd qualify him as dependable. Esteban Ocon is the other driver. He's 29, from France. He placed 15th last year, has been racing full-time in F1 since 2017, although he had to sit out 2019 when Lance Stroll's dad bought the team out from under him and installed his son as a driver, which must have been particularly tough because Ocon is one of the few F1 drivers, like Hamilton, from a more humble background. There's a lot of rich kids here. His parents famously sold their house and lived in a motorhome so they could bring him to all of his racing events. He does have a reputation for clashing with his teammates, but we haven't seen that so much recently. He's sort of become one of F1's journeyman drivers with occasional flashes of brilliance, but generally just a steady hand recently. Next up, Rob.
We were talking about the Audi team, semi-new to F1. Audi bought out a long-standing team that was usually toward the back of the grid, the Sauber team. They've changed names and partners for a number of years, but the Sauber organization has been around, and that is the core of the Audi effort. They are going to be going around, and it looks like an Audi, right? Audi's love of sort of matte silver and gray looks with red accents. That is what their car looks like. Critically, the thing that is very exciting from the standpoint, the pitch that was made at the Volkswagen Group for why it was good to get into F1 is that they were going to come in and make their own engine. Their argument is that the Mercedes team is not a true German team. The powertrains, the engine manufacturer for Mercedes is also a UK team. Audi is going to come in and unleash German engineering on F1. Meanwhile, though, the car is still largely made in out of a base in Switzerland, and then a lot of R&D is developed in the UK because F1 is such a UK-centric sport that there's just you miss out on a lot of talent and ability if you don't have a presence in the UK job market. The Audi effort has been troubled though ever since its inception. There was sort of high level struggles about what the vision was for the team. The Audi corporate level seemed uncommitted about things. They finally had to fire a bunch of people, and they brought in former Ferrari team principal and director of their engine manufacturing effort, Mattia Bonato. So you will see him sort of running the show at Audi, but he's not their racing operations sort of leader. That is Jonathan Wheatley serving as team principal. For their lineup this year, they've got Nico Hülkenberg, sort of a really well-respected driver who just never broke through to a top-tier team. He got his first podium in his career last year. So he's sort of their veteran and old hands and has connections with Audi going back some years. He is paired with one of the new young cohort of drivers, Gabriel Bortoleto, a Brazilian who finished 19th in the standings last year and has shown flashes of some real ability, but probably it seems like one of the weaker drivers was been a pretty excellent cohort. So that might not be a knock against him. It's just a tough comparison.
Yeah, he's in a slow car. It's tough to see, or it has been.
Yeah.
All right, next up, Alpine, spelled like Alpine, but it's pronounced that way because it's French. This is the racing brand of the French car company Renault, which is partly owned by France. They've really struggled over the past 5 years, which I chalk up to chaotic leadership and the fact that until this year, they used their own Renault engine, which was significantly down on power compared to the others in the field. But they scrapped that program, and this year will be their first as a Mercedes customer team. Their current team principal is Flavio Briatore, who ran the Renault team in the early 2000s until he was banned from the sport entirely for instructing his driver to crash to help the other driver win the race. But I guess we're fine with that now, especially if you've seen the F1 movie. They are a blue and pink car. They also have bases in the UK. Their drivers are Pierre Gasly. He's French. He's 30. He last year placed 18th. He's another ex-Red Bull driver. He lasted 12 races. However, again, I'd say he steadily has earned himself a reputation for getting on top of subpar cars, which is a skill he has needed at Alpine. I'm hoping that this new engine will allow him to shine a little more. His teammate is Franco Colapinto, 22, from Argentina. He had a stressful rookie season last year when he and another driver named Jack Doohan basically traded off until their team principal decided on Colapinto. He failed to get any points last year, but I don't think that's wholly indicative of his skill. I think the microscope is going to be on him again this year, though. And if the car is better, he'll have to stick close to his teammate or risk getting booted. And finally, Rob, did you have things to...
America's team, Cadillac.
The new team.
So Cadillac is actually an American organization, unlike the Haas team, which is owned by an American, has some facilities in the U.S., but is largely, again, run out of a broom closet in Ferrari's factory. Cadillac had a long and harrowing saga to get into the sport. It started with the Andretti family, and particularly Michael Andretti's quest to get an F1 team started up. But the F1, for a variety of administrative reasons, rules reasons about getting into the sport, but also became apparent as the saga went on, a lot of personal antipathy directed toward Michael Andretti. The Andretti organization could not crack their way into F1. That culminated with Michael Andretti selling his stake in the team effectively to Dan Tauris, his longtime business partner, and the Andretti organization had a bid accepted to become the new F1 team, and they were partnered with General Motors and particularly Cadillac, which is sort of their the brand they have leading most of their racing efforts these days, in addition to Corvette. However, the Cadillac effort is a ways off from developing its own engine. They are using Ferrari engines for this year. They are primarily based theoretically in Indiana, a facility that the Andretti organization has put a lot of investment into. But obviously they have facilities in hubs around the U.S., and they have the pretty much required facility in the UK. They're led by team principal Graham Loden, and they have two returning, I don't know if you'd call them fan favorites, but two well-regarded old guys coming in as their drivers. First is Sergio Perez, a 36-year-old Mexican driver who had a good start to his Red Bull career at his last tour of duty there, but became one of that sad collection of drivers who was publicly humiliated week after week by Max Verstappen, dominating races while Sergio Perez struggled to score points at any of them. And Red Bull sort of unceremoniously dumped him, and he spent a year or two, I can't remember at this point, cooling his heels, waiting for an opportunity, and that came here. I do think the fact that he is sort of based in North America probably helped him with getting the spot at Cadillac. He is paired with Valtteri Bottas, a 36-year-old Finnish driver who was partnered with Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes for a number of years and has become sort of a unlikely social media star as he gave up on his ambitions of being a particularly accomplished championship winning driver and started living Moss, let us say. And just started leaning into a particularly Finnish brand of weirdness. If you play video games and you're familiar with the studio Remedy, makers of Max Payne and Alan Wake, there is an inherent Finnishness that's out there, and Valtteri Bottas is an example of that. He likes saunas, cycling, and being bare ass naked on social media. So he's a good follow. It's a good time. Great things are not expected from this team, but they also look unlikely to be the worst, given how badly some things are going elsewhere on the grid.
And those are the teams. We will, I think, for our next episode, get deeper into what we've seen in testing. But we can move on right now, I think, to the calendar, places we're going this year. One of my favorite things about F1 is the sort of traveling circus feel of the sport, with everyone rolling up to a new country and spinning up these crazy events. Danny, where are we going this year?
Yeah, a couple of changes for folks who are watching for the past few seasons. So Spain this year is a bit funny because we have two Grand Prix happening there. So the regular circuit, the Barcelona-Catalonia one, is now going to be called the Barcelona-Catalonia Grand Prix. It is going to be rotating with Spa, apparently, going forward. And then the other one, the Madrid, which is the the street circuit that's happening in Madrid, that is going to be known as the Spanish Grand Prix. Imola has been discontinued, so we're not going back to the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. And then the Azerbaijan Grand Prix is going to be held on a Saturday because the Azerbaijani government has Remembrance Day on that Sunday, which is connected to the 2020, the second Nagorno-Karabakh war, which, I don't know, get into too much into geopolitics, but Azerbaijan are largely the aggressor in that situation. Yep. So it's a little bit weird to have Remembrance Day for the war you started trying to take over.
But this
this disputed territory.
This is like F1 is weird money and weird politics, and it's just a little sprinkling that I like about this sport.
I suspect the Armenian F1 fans won't be super jazzed about that Saturday race. But anyway, I digress. And then the other thing to say is that the sprint weekends, which we've talked about earlier, the races where the sprint will happen, I will point out during this rundown. But essentially, it's China, Miami, Canada, the British Grand Prix, the Dutch Grand Prix, and Singapore will be those. So we start very soon on March 8th at the Australian Grand Prix, which has become the starting race of the season over the past few years at Albert Park in Melbourne. Then we're to China the following week for a sprint weekend at the Shanghai International Circuit. 2 weeks after that, we got the Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka. Then the 12th of April, so another little break there, the Bahrain Grand Prix at the Bahrain International Circuit in Sakir. A week after that, April 19th, the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix happens at the Jeddah Street Circuit. Then we have a short kind of break again. The 3rd of May, the Miami Grand Prix starts with a sprint weekend at the Miami International Autodrome, also known as the parking lot of the Hard Rock Stadium. A couple of weeks later, we have another sprint weekend. So back-to-back at the Canadian Grand Prix at the fantastic Gilles Villeneuve circuit on the 24th of May. 7th of June, we are at Monaco for the Monaco Grand Prix, which is one of the worst but most photogenic races in world motorsport. The Barcelona-Catalonia Grand Prix is a week after that on June 14th. June 28th, we head to the Red Bull Ring, previously mentioned, owned by Red Bull, at the Austrian Grand Prix in Spielberg. Then we are 5th of July going to Silverstone for the British Grand Prix, which is a sprint weekend this year. Spa-Francorchamps returns July 19th for the Belgian Grand Prix. The 26th of July, a week later, we'll be at the Hungaroring, which is the Hungarian Grand Prix. And then we have the proper summer break. We return 23rd of August for the Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort, which is a sprint weekend, and I believe the final Zandvoort we're having, if I remember correctly. 6th of September is the Italian Grand Prix at Monza. 13th of September, the Spanish Grand Prix at that new Madrid, if they finish it. The 26th of September, we head to Azerbaijan, aforementionedly on a Saturday, racing at the Baku City Circuit in Baku. The 11th of October, we head back to Asia for the Singapore Grand Prix at Marina Bay, which is a nighttime race in the heat. It's also a sprint weekend. That is going to be a rough one for them. They return then on the 25th of October to North America for a little while. The United States Grand Prix in Austin, Texas on that 25th of October. A week later, 1st of November, we head to Mexico City for the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez track and the wonderful Grand Prix that happens there. A week later after that, we continue traveling south to Sao Paulo and hit up Interlagos on November 8th. A little bit of a gap as they travel back up north to the Las Vegas Strip to race the night race at Las Vegas on the 21st of November, which is the third last race of the calendar this year. Then we are at the penultimate race at the Qatar Grand Prix in Lusail on the 29th of November. So splitting Thanksgiving there. And then the final race of the season happens December 6th at the long time now home of the final race of the season in Abu Dhabi as the sun sets on Yas Marina Circuit.
Yes, it is a behemoth of a season, 24 races, but again, we will be with you the entire time. Finally, I just want to welcome F1 newcomers. It can be intimidating to jump into something like this, and the more annoying F1 fans can be pretty protective of their precious sport, but racing is for everyone. That's what we believe. We love it, and we want more people to be excited about it. Our goal is to keep our show accessible so that more people can learn it too. Like I mentioned before, you can write in at shiftf1podcast@gmail.com or go to f1.cool, which is our website, /emails. We'll also have an F1 fantasy league. Yes, F1 does fantasy sports.
Good luck this year.
Once that gets started, we'll post a link to join on the socials and put it in our podcast show notes. And if you want, you can ask other listeners of Shift F1 by joining our Discord channel, which is also newbie friendly. People are really nice in there, and it's a great time. And you can do that via Patreon, Danny.
Yes, this whole thing is funded by Patreon. We've been on Patreon for a long, long time now and have produced bunches of exclusive podcasts that you can go listen to. Primers for Racing series, other types of racing in the past. Predominantly the past couple of years have been dominated by hilarious movie reviews. Some, of how much car is in the movie sometimes,
Sometimes not at all, as it turns out.
Sometimes not that much. We review every season of Drive to Survive. The new season of Drive to Survive, of course, starting this Friday. I think today it's out on Netflix. We've done both Italian Jobs. We've done Torque. We've done the Earnhardt series last year. Christine. We did the Love Bug. Journey Back to Christmas. Downhill Racer. Even skiing got in there. And you can, of course, if you become a patron, you get access to not just feature episodes, but the entire backlog. Just for $5 a month, you get access to all of that. For $10 a month, we also give you video versions of those exclusive podcasts too. And then if you're an absolute sicko, you can become a title sponsor for $50 a month, and we will read your name out at the top of every podcast, or as I'm about to do here at the end of this preseason primer. I also want to mention that we have a 90% off your first month running until the start of the season on March 8th. So if you'd like to join up, you essentially get the first month for as free as we are allowed to do on Patreon. That is open right now. If you reach a page and they want a code, just type in multi26, Seb, multi26, MULTI26. But if you go to the Patreon page, it just by default should have 90% off your first month if you want to start. And that's for any one of those tiers. And of course, a massive thanks to all of our, at this present time, title sponsors, RIP Egberto and Igor Furman. TVGP.tv, which is a video game podcast, I assume. Let's Margot Racing, Eaching Wells, Dr. V, Deange, It's a Me Ferrario, Petro States, Mojo Nixon, Get Rich or Die Ryan, Agave ATX, Cyphus Training, Turf SCS, Michael Maves, Cigarettes Thanks DDR for a Great 2025, Telemetry Deck Racing Team, FTC, Badass Calendar 2026, Drew Stewart, Helmut Marco's Long Shadow, Bailey Foot, High Speed Low Drag, Abraham Getchell, Fiends 1-4, Snigs, This Walker Got Hired,
All right.
Congratulations, Alex Goucher, Max Voltar Keyboards, Jeff Foster, Troy Stammer, William Rumpf, Lachlan the Madden Man, Samurai Love Story, and Jason Kelly. You'll get used to that, as you will also get used to me reading from the Necronomicon, also known as This Day in F1. So every episode we will read out what happened this day in the past, but not today, because we've talked enough.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here. Let's get some final thoughts ahead of the 2026 season. Danny.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk a lot on the first episode about what we think about these new regulations, what we think about where the teams are, how testing has gone. It's always hard to tell exactly what's going to happen in the first few races because teams withhold, performance, they sandbag, they fix stuff. It's. I don't know about Rob. I know some teams are really bad this year. I can't tell who's at the top. It's just. At this stage, it's seemingly impossible to see, and that is very exciting.
Yeah. Rob, final thoughts.
Yeah, no, I'm with Danny. There's a lot of... We'll talk about this more next week. I'm eager to have this conversation with y'all. Some drivers have already been bagging on the new cars, the new regulations.
Yes.
There's been some issues. But from what I saw, those look like fun little race cars. Something that F1 hasn't had in a minute. And so nothing I saw in testing made me less interested in F1. So I'm cautiously optimistic.
Yeah,
here.
I'm optimistic for it being weird, and that is what I'm excited about.
Yes.
Like, it could go, these new regulations, we haven't really seen the actual racing with them yet. So it could be a complete disaster.
Exactly.
But
Or race starts, which could be very interesting.
But however, even if there is some glaring imbalance, things are always changing, and F1 is incentivized to keep its product entertaining. So the hope is that things would be addressed quickly. But like that kind of stuff is just making me more excited to see how things shake out. So I'm excited for it. I'm excited to have all of our listeners here with us for the season. And until next week, have a good race weekend, everyone, and we will see you all next week.